Okay, we're back. This is part 4 of What Every Girl Should Know, book 14 of the Little Blue Book series, and it is written by Margaret H. Sanger. We're on chapter 5, page looks like 38. Chapter 5 is reproduction, and we are on part 1. Okay, here we go. In teaching children or young persons the process of reproduction, one of the cleanest, most natural, and beautiful methods is to tell them the process which goes on in the various forms of life in the flower, fish, frog, bird, and to lead up to the highest and most complex of all living creatures, man. They watch the butterfly and the bee carry a load of pollen from the father buttercup to fertilize the seeds within the mother flowers. They watch Mr. and Mrs. Frog awaken from their long winter nap and, stirred by the life-giving impulse within them, start for the breeding pond. They watch Father Thrush win his mate and patiently stand guard over her during the tedious hatching days. They are told and see that the flowers depend upon outside forces to bring the pollen from the male to the female to fertilize the seeds before the seeds could grow. They are taught that the mother fish lays her eggs in the water first, and that the father fish, unlike the flowers, being able to move about, carries the pollen, which is now a fluid, to the seeds himself. They are told that Father Frog, being a higher creature, fertilized the eggs before they reached the water, and Father Thrush, being still higher in the scale, fertilized the eggs before they left the mother's body. That the higher the species was, the greater the care required to preserve the species. The girl at puberty should be taught this process and something of what goes on within the womb after the ovum has been fertilized. She should know that all organic life is the result of a simple cell. That man is a community of cells handed together and depending upon each cell to carry out on its work for the benefit of the whole. Let us first, then, get an idea of a cell and what it is and what it does. A cell is a tiny portion of living matter having in its center a spot or nucleus which represents the point of germination. It is separated from its sister cells by partitions of cell membrane. A simple cell is formed by the fusion of two germ cells when they meet to exchange nuclear elements. After this fusion, they are able to proceed with fission, which means splitting into parts, and is the subsequent cellular growth of the fused germ cell that constitutes reproduction. There are two kinds of reproductive cells, the ova in the female and the spermatozoa in the male. When the sexual act takes place, there is deposited into the vagina a secretion known as semen. According to one authority, each deposit or ejaculation contains 50,000 spermatozoa. About the same time in the act, there occur in the female spasmodic contractions of the muscles of the uterus, which draws in a small amount of the semen which the male has left there. The sperm cell of the male, under the microscope, shows that it has both head and tail. The tail enables it to move in advance with a tadpole-like motion towards the ovum. As in the lower forms of life, the male cell has within it the instincts to chase and capture the female cell. Consequently, it does not depend upon the uterine contractions of the female to enable it to reach the ovum for fertilization. The vagina, being a corrugated or wrinkled tube, hides and secretes the sperm cell for days unless it is removed with water or killed by poisonous injections. When, however, the sperm comes near the ovum, it is drawn to it as to a magnet. The ovum being carefully protected by nature within the ovaries, leaving its sister cells and travels alone. The sperm cell, however, having more dangerous paths to travel, must provide against the uncertainty of doing its great work by going in numbers. Though it takes but a single cell to produce human life, a number of the male cells go to meet the ovum, but only one enters it. Almost at the moment the head enters the ovum, it becomes completely absorbed by the ovum, and all trace of it is lost. This union of the two cells is called fertilization, fecundation, impregnation, or conception. Any of these terms may be used. This union usually takes place in the tube, but the fertilized egg does not remain there. It wanders along and finds its way into the uterus. Now that the ovum has been fertilized, it readily becomes attached to the soft lining of the uterus, which has been specially prepared to receive it. No menstruation occurs. The woman is now pregnant. A new being is created, and marvelous changes will now take place within the tiny cell clinging so weakly to the lining of the uterus. At this time, the ovum is so small it can scarcely be seen by the naked eye, but in 2 weeks it has grown to the size of a pea, in 4 weeks to the size of a walnut, and in 8 weeks to the size of a lemon. At this time, it is 3 inches long and is completely formed, the head being much larger in proportion to the rest of the body. What has happened to the ovum in these few weeks is briefly this. All the changes in the evolution of the animal kingdom that man had to pass through to arrive at this present shape, the human embryo goes through the step by step within the uterus in a very short period. Immediately after fertilization, the ovum begins to divide into sections or lobes into 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. cells until they are almost numberless. Each cell splits in the middle of the nucleus, forming 2 complete new cells, and so on. In the next stage, this mass of cells forms into shape like a hollow ball. The third stage is the meeting of the 2 layers of cells, as if the ball had collapsed, and these 2 layers meet and unite as one, stretch and flatten out like a worm. After this stage, things happen more complicated. New organs begin to develop. Line marks for the backbone and intestinal canal show themselves, and as do the bony and muscular structure of the skeleton. A slight pulsation is observed, showing the development of the heart. The head fold is formed by the gradual bending of the spinal column at the front end of the ovum, which we now call the embryo. There are also formed at this time processes which soon become arms and legs. There is a furrow on the face, pits for the eyes, and all of this has happened in less than 4 weeks. From this time forward, development is rapid. The bones, which up to this point have been soft matter, grow harder, and all organs which were only outlined now become definitely formed. At the end of the 4th month, its embryo has grown to its normal shape. The remaining months, it increases in size and gains strength. The uterus becomes enlarged, rises out of the pelvis, and occupies the abdominal cavity. It takes 40 weeks or 280 days to complete the growth of the human embryo, although the time may be 2 weeks more or less and still be normal. Let us see how the child has been fed all this time. When the ovum is fertilized and up to the 8th week, it is fed by delicate branched threads which form a covering for it. These threads are called villi and dip into the uterine surface for nourishment from the mother to supply the embryo. About the 8th week, These villi have become greatly intertwined into a mass of spongy tissue full of blood vessels called the placenta, or afterbirth. This fastens itself to the side of the uterus, takes oxygen as well as nutriment from the mother, and sends it through the umbilical cord to the child at the point of attachment, being at the navel. The depression left on the belly of the child by the cutting of the umbilical cord at birth. In the same way, it takes the waste products from the child to the mother, and she in turn throws them out of her system through the kidneys, bowels, and skin. The child and placenta are both encased with a membranous sac, which secretes and serves to hold a watery fluid in which the child swims. The child is folded together with legs on the thighs and thighs on the bellies, arms on the chest, and head bent forward over the breast. Toward the end of the term, it moves about slightly, often stretches a little, and has periods of rest when it scarcely moves, and again periods of great activity. A mother first feels the child move in the 4th or 5th month. Often the young mother at this time begins to worry over her acts, lest something she should do might deform the precious charge she carries. This, as you can readily understand from its early development, is impossible, for by the end of the 2nd month the child has been formed, and no mental impressions of the mother can alter its shape. Just as the nucleus of the male sperm has within it all the contributions which the father of the child can give it until after it is born, so does the mother give it its physical qualities right at the beginning. Whatever it is to be inherited from the father must be within the substance of the spermatozoon at the time of the ovum is fertilized. He has no further prenatal influence over it. How? Turn page. How great or how little influence a mother has over her child through her thoughts has not been proven, nor has the subject of determining or influencing the sex of the unborn child been settled. At the end of 9 months, the child's development is complete, and it is ready for its journey to the outside world. The process of this journey is called labor, a word which will describe the mother's share in it. When this occurs before the embryo is able to live outside the uterus, it is known as abortion. Reproduction, Part 2. In the first part of this chapter, I said that if the process of labor occurs before the 7th month, which is the earliest time of the fetus or embryo can live for any length of time outside the womb, it is known as abortion or miscarriage. When labor occurs later than this, or within 2 weeks before term, it is known as premature labor. Drink break. The average girl is using the word abortion has in mind a criminal act, whereby the process of pregnancy is purposely interrupted. She prefers the word miscarriage. There is also a belief in the early stages of pregnancy can be brought about without bad results or any serious consequences to her health. It is a mistake to regard an abortion as a slight importance, for any interruption in the process of pregnancy is always more dangerous than the natural labor at full term. One writer claims there are more women ill in consequence of abortion than from full-term childbirth, on account of which there are so many women who are semi-invalids. There can be no doubt that the often excessive loss of blood leaves the woman in a weak and run-down condition, thereby lessening her powers of resistance to other diseases. The shock to the woman's system is greater than that produced by natural labor, and consequently leaves her in a hysterical and often critical nervous state for some time after. The causes of abortion are many. Among them are overexertion, overexcitement, shock, fright, fall, great anger, dancing, fatigue, lifting heavy weights, purgative medicines, and excessive sexual intercourse. The dangers resulting from abortion are blood poison, hemorrhage, even lockjaw has been known to be the result of abortion. There is also the danger that one miscarriage is likely to follow another, and many disable a woman to carry a child to the full term. If there is the same care and treatment given the woman who aborts as the woman in childbirth, she will naturally be less likely to suffer serious results than if no medical attention was given her. One of the most common disturbances of pregnancy is nausea, more commonly called morning sickness, because it is felt in the morning when the woman first assumes the erect position. As a rule, this lasts only during the early months. About the latter part of the 4th month, or often not before the 5th month, movements of the fetus are felt. These movements are called life, and women are glad of this signal that all is progressing naturally. One writer said a woman has described the first feeling of life as the trembling movements of a bird within the hand. That's interesting. Another drink break. There are often many nervous manifestations accompanying the pregnant woman, such as headache, neuralgia, toothache, and as the usual thing, constipation is always present and should receive attention. The teeth also should receive attention at this time, for they decay easily on account of the secretions in the mouth, which are increased during pregnancy. The breasts enlarge in the early months of pregnancy, and there is a fullness and tingling felt often in the 5th week. The nipples become erect, and the skin around the nipple becomes dark brown. There are only a few of the disturbances of pregnancy, but enough to show that other organs besides the uterus are tested in strength, and how important it is to have a good, healthy body. In fact, every tissue and fiber in the woman's body feels the impetus of pregnancy, and all kinds of physical changes occur. One of the common questions asked by young women in early married life is how to tell whether they are pregnant. This is not always easy, but there are a few points on which a diagnosis is based. Namely, in a healthy woman during the reproductive age, the function of menstruation stops. The morning sickness comes on, and enlargement of the breasts with dark color around the nipples. There are early indications that pregnancy exists. I am not going to take the time nor space to explain that all three of the above named can exist in nervous women, even when pregnancy does not exist. It is, as I said before, with the average healthy girl I am dealing, not with the exception. The only certain signs of pregnancy are hearing the heartbeats of the child and feeling its movements. Another question which troubles a young woman is how to count the time when she will be confined. This too is difficult to say, for an error of 2 weeks earlier or later is possible, because the time of conception is seldom definitely known. Experience has given a method of arriving at an approximate date which is used and which answers the purpose fairly well, though it is by no means perfect. Add 7 days to the first day of the last menstruation and count 9 months forward. For example, Miss A menstruated last beginning October 5th. Add 7 days, This brings the date to October 12th, and 9 months, which will bring the date of confinement to July 12th. It is well to have everything prepared 2 weeks before this date so that the woman can be as much as possible in the open air during the remaining waiting days. The dress of the pregnant woman should receive serious attention. In the first place, it should be simple and warm, without bands restricting the circulation of any part of the body, like skirt bands, round garters, corsets, and tight shoes. The secret of the comfortable outfit for the expectant mother is to have all clothing hang from the shoulders. Combination underwear can be bought as reasonably as the separate drawers and shirt. There should be no pressure on the womb from above, rather let all support come from below. The corset gets in its harmful work by pressing down on the uterus into the pelvis, thus displacing the abdominal organs and crowding them together in such a way as to cause injury to the uterus as well as to the child itself. The muscles of the uterus and abdomen are weakened, and from this result that horror of all women, the high stomach. Some women, especially those having born children, prefer to wear in the latter days of pregnancy an abdominal supporter. If it is well fitted to the body, it helps to assist the abdominal muscles in carrying the weight and affords great relief. If women would devote to making themselves comfortable during pregnancy as much time as they give to the baby's outfit, they would profit by it. Instead of wearing an old worn-out dress, ill-fitting and out of style, make one maternity dress to fit the figure. This can, of course, be let out in size as the figure grows. It can be made of some pretty inexpensive material and gives such comfort and ease to the mind as well as to the body that the woman who has once had one will never again do without it. The food also should be simple. In fact, there are few restrictions to be placed on food unless so ordered by the physician. One common mistake of women is that they believe they are eating too many persons and they're eating for 2 persons. Boy, that was strange there for a minute. They're eating for 2 persons and consequently must gorge themselves, which of course results in indigestion. Physicians advise a small amount of meat once a day, plenty of water, milk, and cereals, fruits, vegetables, and especially fruit, which loosens the bowels. Rich pastry or starches fried in fat should not be eaten, because they are hard to digest. There is no reason why the diet should be at all strict unless a woman is under the special care of a physician. She should take a moderate amount of exercise every day, but should not get tired. Walking in the open air in the sunlight is best avoided. Dancing, swimming, and all violent exercises. Sewing on a sewing machine should be restricted. Fainting in the early months is often caused from bad air in overcrowded and overheated rooms, also from an empty stomach when the woman is too busy to notice nature's call for nourishment. Pardon me. It is now generally agreed that alcohol taken by the mother during pregnancy has very bad effects on the offspring. There is little more to be said here except that a pregnant woman should be mentally and physically active.
Should I send this message to?
Though without becoming fatigued. And of all things, she should keep out of the hearing of old superstitions, which have a sign for every act and keep a young woman constantly worried. She should not be allowed to worry over her approaching labor. and as far as possible she should be kept cheerful and happy. At the end of the period, the child and the placenta are expelled from the uterus. The uterus gradually returns to its former size. It requires about 6 weeks for this to occur, and it is very important that there should be no heavy lifting or overwork at this time. As a rule, the childbirth, the woman's form becomes matured and more developed. The facial expression takes on a kinder, a maternal look. The whole nervous system is awakened to sympathy, pain, or grief, bringing tears to the eyes quicker than ever before. Especially is this true for the first few years following. The important thing is that the care of the pregnant woman should be begun in girlhood. If we are going to be and have mothers, then we should give attention to the development of the organs which make mothers. And I think I'll stop there. See you in the next one.